This podcast episode is sponsored by Geekdom, San Antonio's entrepreneurship hotspot and co-working space. Whether you need one-time, recurring office space or event space, Geekdom has it all. Use code Social Butterfly when signing up for a membership to receive $25 off of monthly memberships. Welcome back to Unapologetically Visible, the podcast for high-achieving Latina and women of color founders who are done being the best kept secret. I'm your host, Christina Olivarez, award-winning visibility and leadership coach, TEDx speaker, and founder and CEO of the Social Butterfly Gal and Hustle and Socialize. One of the biggest challenges that my clients face is while they are visible and respected in their industry, many are still underpositioned for the level that they are operating at. And you know what? That was the pattern that I had to confront a few years ago for myself in my business when it came to my visibility and the amount of effort that I was doing and working. And it wasn't specifically being translated into the revenue opportunities or the visibility opportunities that I really wanted to have for the level that I was operating at. When your identity has evolved, but your messaging and positioning and visibility haven't caught up yet, that's where it starts to create friction in your business. Buyers end up taking longer to make a decision if they want to work with you or if they want to hire you. You start attracting people who really admire you, but they really aren't fully ready to invest. I have heard this from a lot of my clients that have said, a lot of people send me messages that all of my posts are and I'm very inspirational and motivational, but I don't understand why they aren't ready to work with me and excited about wanting to work with me right now. And oftentimes that's when your revenue is either fluctuating and it's depending on you and your energy and the consistency within your visibility. That's the gap that my framework, Visibility to Legacy, is designed to close. And that's what this episode is going to be about. I'm going to take you through the framework that I use for all of my coaching clients inside of my private coaching program and the other offers that I have in coaching, and give you a behind the scenes look at how we could work together to create the results that you're looking for through my one-on-one coaching programs. I created my coaching framework, Visibility to Legacy, because I was ready for my own visibility to translate into the level of authority and positioning and revenue that I knew I was capable of. There was a season where I was showing up consistently and I really had a great brand face, the face of the brand. I was invited to rooms. I was speaking on all these stages. I was building that body of work that I'm super proud of having. And I was even building my own table. I was doing all of this work that I was super proud of. And yet something still felt off. From the outside, if you were to look at my social media, you would see that this girl has visibility and momentum like no other. But like I always tell all of my clients, social media is only the highlight reels. It is not telling the full story. And this is where you should not compare yourself to anybody else because social media is a great facade. It's a great lie. And that was what was happening was through the lens of social media, you would think that my visibility was incredible and I had all this momentum, but internally I could feel the gap between who I was, who I had become, and how I was actually being seen. And this is what I like to call the in-between time frame of my brand. This was around 2022. 2023, where I had made the decision to sunset my social media management company. And I was really starting to pivot more on focusing on building my coaching business. And so I had this reputation and this visibility of being the social media guru, the social media strategist. Anybody who thought of my brand automatically would think she's the go-to person for social media management. But that was no longer the case. I had made the decision that I was ready to sunset that, let that go, and start pivoting into more coaching. And I think one of the things that I was recognizing in that time frame of 22 to 23 was I was still positioning my brand and my personal brand in ways that reflected an earlier version of me. That social media gurus or social media strategists. And there was a disconnect. And that disconnect was quietly costing me in my sales cycle, in my messaging, and in the level of clients I was attracting. And I think that we don't necessarily think about all of the different ways that our messaging is hurting us or helping us, especially when you are established and you've built a reputation around a specific thing or a specific offer or service. And that really kind of dilutes how people are going to perceive you, but also how they are going to work with you. And so I really started in that time frame asking a different question. And I had a couple of clients that were my test case clients for my coaching. And what I was noticing was in order for me to make my visibility fully translate into trust, demand, and revenue and have the same specific outcome for my clients that I was coaching at the time, I knew I had to start asking very different questions. And those answers to those questions ended up becoming the foundation of how I lead today in my coaching, how I work with clients in all of my coaching programs, and how I coach them to what is now my visibility to legacy framework. And so one of the things that I was recognizing and completely sort of diving into was the why behind my work and the why behind why my clients work with me. And so there's a lot of reasons why someone could say that they want coaching, but that's not actually how my clients make those decisions. The women who choose to work with me one on one, specifically in my long term private coaching program, that's very high level, it's very high proximity. It's a different caliber and a different way of thinking how you lead. Those women are not sitting there asking themselves, do I need support? Or what type of support do I need, right? They're already invested, they've already established, already grown, they've proven that they can execute. And so what they're asking is something much deeper than that. What they're asking is, who do I trust to meet me at the level that I'm already operating at right now? And that's where this becomes a very different kind of decision making from a leadership standpoint, especially with coaching, is a lot of my clients do not come to me just to be fixed or to fix a problem that needs to be solved. They definitely don't come to me when they just want another strategy. Maybe they don't have strategy in place, but it really is very different from the complexity of who they are and how they're leading. They come to me and they work with me in my one-on-one coaching because they want to be in a space where their ambition and their identity and their leadership is all being understood without being reduced to a specific thing. This is not where we're shrinking their thinking. This is really being coached at the level that they are operating in right now, but really kind of pulling the onion back and getting them to their next level of how they think and how they decide and how they make decisions based off of identity. One of the things that I was recognizing is a lot of my clients are working with me in coaching because they want a mirror when it comes to helping them refine how they think. At a certain level, it's not so much an action problem anymore. We already know that you can take action, but it really becomes a discernment problem and a decision making problem. And so I help them sharpen how they think, and everything else sort of recalibrates around them. And so they're not necessarily buying tactics anymore. They are really investing in proximity to a higher level of thinking. And a lot of that is obviously in two different factors, their leadership development and their visibility. And so a lot of my clients are not really struggling anymore with being seen. They know that there is a gap between who they've already become and how they're currently positioned, which really aligns with what things that I was facing in the earlier parts of my own business, where I was recognizing that that gap was costing me opportunities and revenue that I really wanted. And that's the same exact gap that is costing them right now. And that is where a lot of that gap feels very heavy. It feels very misaligned, and it feels like they've outgrown something that they've once worked so hard to build, which is why they're making that decision to be in close proximity to a coach who is helping them have a different way of thinking, a different way of leading, and a different way of making decisions that feels really grounded, precise, and self led. And that is exactly why this work and my framework isn't random. It's not reactive. It's not based on what feels good in the moment or what's trending in the industry or what the algorithm is telling you what to do. It's a very clear process that I move my clients through, because when you're operating at this level, you don't need to have more noise. You don't need those tactics or all of the things that you hear other gurus or other coaches tell you to do, whether it is algorithm based tactics or sales tactics. What you really need is precision, and you need that structure that can actually hold the level of identity, visibility, and leadership that you're stepping into. And that's where my visibility to legacy framework comes in, because everything that I just named, the identity shifts, the visibility recalibration, the authority, the leadership, none of that happens by accident. It happens through a very intentional evolution. And I want to walk you through what this actually looks like in practice. This framework, my visibility to legacy framework, was built from years of sitting in rooms with powerful women who were no longer beginners. They were established leaders, but also no longer aligned with the version of themselves that built their current success. And it's also tested, tried, and true the clients that I was working on when I too wasn't exact that moment. That's when I saw over and over again with the clients that I coach is that, wow, yes, we do strategy and we have specific metrics that you need to hit from a strategic level. What my clients really needed was that recalibration. And that's what visibility to legacy framework does. It walks you through 5 specific phases, not as concepts, but as something we actually operationalize inside your business and your leadership. So I want to go through this framework. And the first phase of that framework is identity recalibration. This is where we start for a reason, because if your identity is outdated, everything that you build on top of it is going to be misaligned. And so we start with identity recalibration first, because obviously you've already built something that already had extraordinary success, but you're recognizing that I am either not aligned with the direction that I want my business to go, or maybe the visibility opportunities that I'm getting now are not really translating into the amount of money that I want. Or maybe you're in that season where you're going to create a different offer, something new, you're at a transition phase, and you really recognize that your identity needs to be recalibrated before you take action. And so that is the work that we do in that phase 1. We take a look at where you are now, not who your brand was 2, 3, even 5 years ago, but we start naming what you've outgrown. And we also kind of just look at some of the conditions that you've had in your visibility, in your leadership, and name what you have started to outgrown. And so when it comes to that identity recalibration, we start dissecting and really kind of doing a big autopsy of what I like to call, where we look at your positioning. We see what is no longer fitting and how you're positioned in the market, how you're positioned in other markets. We start looking at your audience to see if that ideal audience is aligned with the direction that you want to go. And we start naming all of the ways that maybe you have been self-betraying yourself just to maintain the old momentum that you've had. So this is where we start rebuilding your internal authority, because a lot of high achieving women, like I said before, they don't necessarily have a strategy problem. A lot of that is fractured in self-trust. And so in this phase, we're not just talking about identity, we're really looking at it from a very precise moment of who you are, what you stand for now, what you are no longer tolerating, and what you're actually here to lead. And we also take a look at some of the fears that you have around success, around money, around visibility, and we address those fears head on. The second phase of the framework is voice activation. And this pairs very well with it being the second phase, because once your identity is finally clear and you've got some clarity around the decisions that you are ready to start implementing and start making, your voice has to match that. And yes, I'm talking about brand voice. I'm talking about your messaging. I'm talking about the ability to get on camera and speak from the heart. And this is where I see a lot of my clients hiding in plain sight, because they're extremely visible. They have their brands, they're posting on social media, their message sometimes though is being over curated or diluted. And it's diluted to the point where you can feel it's not in the way that it needs to be when it comes to its power. So this is where we really sharpen your voice. We define what your core voice thesis is. We get clear on the tensions that you're here to speak to and naming that specifically for your audience. And we strip away anything that feels defensive, performative, or overly polished. And what's left is a voice that actually lands with the audience and your most ideal client, because it's truer to you. My mantra has always been being very unapologetic. And that is exactly what we start defining in that voice activation. The third phase is what I like to call authority positioning. So we got the identity, we got the voice, and now this is where your voice starts turning into that power, into that authority. Once we start understanding why your positioning isn't converting, that is where we take a look at, all right, how can we better position your authority for those opportunities, for that high level revenue that you are wanting? And that's where we start cleaning up your offers, your pricing, your sales conversations. I also offer another framework in this phase, which is my visibility filter. And it's something that we also filter through any type of opportunity that might come your way to make sure that it's matching the goals that you have. And especially when we think about undercharging, over delivering, vague invitations, we get you to a place where you are more grounded, that you have a clear pathway and a blueprint for someone to actually not just resonate with you, but prime position your authority to get people to want to automatically work with you. This is where your authority becomes visible in how you sell. And that it's the number one fear that a lot of my clients have, is they don't want to be positioned as salesy. They don't want to come off as convincing. They don't want to do all these things. And that's why in that specific phase of authority positioning, we prime your authority in a way that doesn't come off salesy or convincing. The fourth phase is visibility ecosystem, because your visibility without any structure or systems and processes is going to burn you out. I can't tell you how many clients have come to me that do not have specific systems or processes in place for how they enroll clients, how they get themselves out in the world, in the visibility structure. And that's why it is so important to have a viable ecosystem that's not only going to work in your favor, but it's going to create a really great workflow so that you understand how clients find you, why they want to work with you, what content is landing, what opportunities are going to bring you the best revenue, and that you're not just spinning your wheels. And so this is where we make a simplified decision on where you actually need to be visible and where you don't. I see this a lot from my clients who feel like they got to be on all of the social media platforms, or they got to go to all these events. And in this visibility ecosystem, kind of going back to the visibility filters that I've created, we really get an understanding of where you need to be. And we align your content with your offers. So your visibility is actually driving the revenue and not so much just reach and engagement. It's great that some pieces can go quote unquote viral, but even if you go viral, if it's not contributing to your bottom line, then why would you want to go viral, right? Like, what is the whole point? And that's what we kind of streamline through. We create that rhythm that your nervous system can actually sustain. And we build a sales flow that feels very clean and clear and repeatable, because at this level, you need visibility that's going to work for you. You don't just need viral content, or you don't just need going to all these events trying to be seen. What you need is clients, and what you need is revenue. And that is what this visibility ecosystem actually does. And the last but fifth phase is what I like to call legacy leadership. This is where we zoom out, because the goal is not just to make money. The goal is to build something that actually reflects the level of leader that you are becoming and the ability to be sustainable long term. This is where we look at your brand as a whole, how it is leading and operating from a holistic standpoint. We look at all of the rooms that you are in, the partnerships you are building, the way that your brand is positioned long term. This is where we start thinking about stability, sustainability, and scale, but in a way that doesn't require you to abandon yourself to get there, or puts your nervous system in a position where you are constantly being dysregulated. We really look at how can we not build from the pressure, but build a legacy that is very precise. And one of the things that I'm so proud of with my framework is that this framework has created results for my clients. Clients have gone on to close up to $20,000 of revenue from client projects, speaking engagements. After implementing the work that we do in my frameworks, I've had clients get on the TEDx stage. I've had them land partnerships and podcasts, get invited to speak on stages that they once were in the audience and thought that they were being overlooked. I've had clients refine their positioning so clear that their sales conversations convert much shorter and cleaner. I've had clients that have stepped into their power as a CEO in the face of their brand as they were in the middle of a transition. And most importantly, the biggest ROI that can come from implementing the work in my framework is just how you lead. I think that is the number one thing that I'm so proud of my clients, is their leadership and the way that they make decisions and the way that they just step into their power is so incredible after doing this work. And one thing that is so certain is that if you keep on doing this work, if you keep on implementing it, the revenue is going to follow. The visibility is going to follow. And those opportunities are just going to start flowing because you are primed and positioned in a very different way than you were before you started working with me. If you've been listening to this conversation and there's part of you that feels seen in a way that you haven't been fully ready to articulate, I want to invite you to work with me in private coaching, because that is where we do this work together. And we really use my framework in a way that is going to get you to a very high level proximity based brand where your identity and your visibility and your leadership are recalibrated in a way that reflects who you are becoming and not who you used to be. You can apply to private coaching and working with me long term in the links in the show notes below. Or if you feel like you want a space to think, process, and get clear before you make a long term decision, you can always start with a 90-minute intensive. I want you to give yourself the space to see what's actually happening in your visibility, in your brand, and your leadership. And I want you to make a grounded decision and then move forward with intention. If you resonated with this episode, here's what I want you to do next. Subscribe and leave a review because that helps this podcast reach more women like us, women who were never meant to stay hidden, women who are meant to be highly visible leaders. Share this episode with someone you love who is really wanting to have a very different way of leading and have more visibility with their brand. And DM me on Instagram at the Social Butterfly Gal. Tell me your biggest refrain, your biggest breakthrough from today's conversation. And if you're feeling the call to go deeper, to recalibrate your personal brand, leadership, and visibility, I would love to support you through one-on-one coaching. You can find the coaching information and offers in the links in the show notes below, or send me a DM with the word coaching, and I will personally walk you through what offers are in alignment with your current season and what it looks like to step into this next era with clarity, confidence, and unapologetic authority. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening and for all of the shares and reviews. Remember this. You didn't come this far to play safe. You came here to be unapologetically visible. I'll see you next week.